Hey guys, Robert and Ingrid here, and we are here to finally give our final thoughts on the Alien series as it stands. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
we've given enough time to process, to think about it, and Ingrid has some interesting insights to bring up about everything. Why don't you take the floor first?
The thing that I thought of is that this particular flavor of space horror feels very similar to another kind of horror that's kind of about what's out there in the depths of the universe. And I, of course, mean Lovecraftian or cosmic horror. But I think the big difference between that and this is that largely originated at a time when space travel was just kind of something that was like pie in the sky future. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
this is the kind of stuff that came after that was theoretically possible, after we landed on the moon and stuff like that.
Who
But
knows
that's
what's
not
out there?
yeah, but it's not where the similarities end. A
Nope.
lot of these plots essentially take place in what's essentially the boonies of space.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the particular stories in Lovecraft's works, which I've read pretty much all of them,
Mm-hmm.
take place in places that are pretty rural and backwater too. And in these
Yep.
kinds of stories, you're not going to be defeating the unknowable horror in the depths of space. The
Nope.
best you can kind of hope for is to stop whatever shenanigans their cults are up to, or at least delay the awakening of the apocalypse for just a little while longer.
Yeah,
And
these
so
things are
with
that
that,
powerful.
I
Yeah.
sort of thought of the way that the original Alien trilogy ended, and it's like, you know what? If I'm looking at it that way, that makes perfect sense.
Agreed.
And I
Especially
feel
with
like the duology works for a very similar reasons because it's sort of one of those cases where maybe not knowing the truth is better because the truth kind of sucks bad and is also going to kill you in horrific ways. Like,
definitely.
the point is not the horrifically gory kills, which is where the second Alien versus Predator movie goes off the rails.
Hmm.
The point is that the thing that killed you is something that you could never have known about or anticipated in a million years. And it raises the question of, like, if we found this, what the hell else kind of horrific crap is out there in the wider cosmos?
And you know what? One thing that really falls down into that is when you really think about it, what created the pathogen?
Yeah, it's just like that part is never explained, and I
Nope.
almost never want them to
Oh
explain it.
no.
I just want that to kind of just be an ongoing mystery.
And of course, the big thing as well, did the engineers create the xenomorphs? Or much like what David did off of their work in the proper, what is actually canon now, did they duplicate something that already existed? And if that's the case, were the eggs that were on LV-426 in that ship, was that engineer created? Or was that some of the actual real deal? There's so many questions.
Yeah, and this is the sort of thing where knowing less does a lot better because then your imagination has all of the work to fill in those gaps with something that you would find the most horrifying. So
Definitely.
I hope that as the series goes forward, it raises more questions than it answers with each movie because that's sort of the best way to manage this kind of thing long term.
Because that's where things were at its best. Let's be honest, and that's why the trilogy, Romulus, even the duology, and even the first AVP all fall under this mystery. Granted, AVP was the most streamlined and acting of them all, more so than Aliens, but it still falls into it. So that's the main reason why AVP two just doesn't.
Yeah,
And
it's
four
a
and
lot
four.
more gratuitous and generic by comparison. It's done a lot of tread a lot of ground that we have already seen done many times before, and it's just like, and it sort of misses the point by trying to be like, yeah, kind of finding more inventive and disgusting ways to be
Ugh.
gory, whereas it's like the gore in the other Alien movies is only like in service to some like more like existential or psychological horror, like the hell
Mhm.
kind of thing is this?
And I also had a realization about resurrection.
Yeah.
If we're to believe that the engineer, okay, if we go by this step, let's just assume, for the sake of argument, the Xenomorphs already existed. Then you had the engineers, who are practically up there with, like, they're old god wannabes. Because they are, let's be honest, they are. They're mortal beings, but they're dabbling with stuff that's practically playing God. They make their own Xenomorphs. Then you have David, a step beneath them, trying to make his own thing, but he's doing better than others. Then you have, but on that same branch from what the engineers did, then you have what happened in Resurrection, which is more steps down from David.
And it's like, it's not even like Resurrection's ideas were bad. It's just that they were handled really clumsily. Like, blurring the line between the human and the horror is always a great place to find a lot of fun. And you can go either directions, like a lot of different directions with that they just didn't go anywhere interesting with it. And so it left me wondering more about how this movie could be better than it is something that I enjoyed as much as most of the others, because most of this series is really good and solid. My main thing is just it's not as good as it could have been over this is bad, which is an achievement compared to a lot of the movie marathons we've done.
Exactly. I mean, even compared to Predator, obviously it's the most easily parable one, but even that one, it's like, with the exception of the Predator, because that totally derailed a lot of the lore. A lot of the lore there is much more straightforward compared to the Xenomorph lore. You know, they're a tribe. And they're hunters. They have a code of honor. We might not do us any favors, but it's still there. You have the idea of the bad bloods, those who go bad and go rogue, and those that try and keep it contained. You have the idea of the enforcers, who will go in and clean up a mess that might tamper their hunting grounds. Which is the only good thing about Requiem. Let's be honest. That was the only good thing was Wolf, and he was an enforcer trying to clean up the mess.
But ultimately, they're not that different from humans, at least if you're comparing them to the Xenomorphs. It's more just, hey, they live longer, they have a different culture, and they have some cool powers. But other than that, they're actually pretty comprehensible from a human scale by comparison. They may be from far out in space, but it's just it'd be easier to find differences between humans on an individual scale than it would to find differences between the humans and the Predators on a larger scale.
And I also had a different realization. Have you noticed that in the first Alien, that thing had a brain? That thing was much it wasn't animalistic compared to what we get in the second one. And the third one, I would blame that on, it being more feral based on the fact that it face hugged an animal, be it a dog or a cow. But then Romulus brought it back up again of it being smart, which made me start to wonder, one of two things. One, did it get smart from being a human? Or two, was being around the queen making it not need to use as much intellect? But when it's out on its own, it has to be much smarter.
I would buy that there would be a case of... I would definitely believe that there would be a little bit of mental slack when there's somebody else that's calling the shots. Because it's humans, people are smart, groups are stupid.
Yep, because like I say, that former suggestion about the being because they bonded to humans, well, most of these Xenomorphs that weren't the queen were from Hadley's Hopes civilians, so that can't be right either. So it probably is a case of environment.
Yeah, it's just it's the more complicated term for that is social loafing, and where if people can shirk off work onto other people, they will.
Exactly. And like I said, because if you didn't know that, right? The Xenomorphs in 2 were just animals. They were just wild animals. They were
a lot more like cannon fodder, though that I feel you can put a little bit down to the conservation of ninjutsu trope. Where it's just you have so many of them that it's really hard to pay attention to them on an individual level. But again, there is that in-universe justification where somebody's calling all of the shots, therefore brain can kind of atrophy a little bit. Someone
Yep.
else is doing the thinking for me, so they're content to let somebody else do the thinking for them.
And AVP 1 kind of shows that too, because those Xenomorphs were brand new and they were still able to think on their own because they didn't get that lax from having the queen around.
Yeah, because the queen was basically a glorified broodmare who couldn't really do much else.
Until they released it, of course. But yeah, up until that point, like Grid was very intelligent. Yeah, but still, so again, this is still a retrospective. So let's go back looking over with the all of them as a whole still. And that the trilogy did, whether we liked it or not, tell a complete story. Can we agree to that?
Yeah, it's the complete story of one woman who got trapped in a bunch of really unfortunate situations.
Yep. And in the end, it ended, if it wasn't going to be a happy ending, it ended the only other way it could. Now, have you watched, you've not played Isolation, correct?
I've not, but I am actually going to be watching a stream of it soon-ish when I go on a trip. So hold that thought for later.
All it says was, you do know it's about Ripley's daughter, right?
Vaguely.
Yep. And it's set in that, obviously, that in between. So, but my guess is since it's up in the air if her deleted scene stuff is canon or not, because obviously this whole thing would throw that into question, her actions in this, in Isolation. But still, I mean, I just find this idea that you can actually expand, like both that and run the show, you can still fill in the lore without contradicting things too much.
Like again, there are plenty of blank spaces left open, and as you fill those in, you can kind of end up raising more questions than answers, like I said before, which is if you're intending to do something long-term, you have to leave open a lot more threads in order to be able to do that. You can't necessarily answer every single question, because sometimes it's better to leave them unanswered and let the speculation carry things. Exhibit A, Five Nights at Freddy's. There's a reason people have been obsessed with the lore for so long, because there aren't clear answers to things.
Exactly. And even then, that was probably the downside of why so many people hated that what Ridley Scott suggested, that David was behind it, because the question it did raise were the bad questions. Like, how does this make sense? It felt like he wanted too many things answered, and then he just went for the simplified that also glorified his creator pet character, and to the point, and then you're just like, but that doesn't make sense. And it's like, I don't know if he cared if it made sense. You kind of got that vibe. Sometimes I get that vibe from Ridley, that he sometimes doesn't care if a story beat doesn't make sense so long as he likes it.
I can definitely see that, because there are definitely a lot of cases, and I said this during the review, where it just seems like the writer's barely disguised fetish. With some of the plot points that crop up completely, and it's just like, hot damn, you have one of the few series where you have a lot of strong female leads that no one complains about, and this is what happens to them. Like, my God, man, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Again, killing off Shaw was one thing, but then implying then that he was going to do the same thing again. Why? Why
like,
do that?
I get wanting to make your characters suffer, but it's just like, at least make the character development interesting, man.
I mean, Shaw's, it made a little sense. A little. Not too much, but it made a little bit more of sense. It's like, you didn't want to just, like, she wouldn't be around that long after what happened, for one thing. And, especially, I don't remember how long they said. It was like a long time between movies. Well, not that long. No, not that long. Just years, but still.
Like, I'd have accepted her being killed when she was, like, in the midst of making her big discovery. That would have been something that you could, like, set up a thread. Like, hey, she was onto this, and this wound up killing her. Now I want to finish what she started.
Exactly. But instead, she rejected him, and he decided, screw it. Why do people go for that, I wonder? But it's like, I can't even blame Ridley for Ripley, because he at least left her in the... Actually, no. Maybe there is something to it because you do know originally he wanted Ripley to die and have the alien mimic her voice.
Oh.
Yep. It was so maybe there is something to it. Which that bothers me. It's just like, I get you want a twist dark ending, but there's a reason why people did push back on that one. It's like, no. Now, granted, you had no idea about sequels. Understandable, but in the long run, it ended up for the best.
Yeah.
But
like a Pyrrhic victory is perfectly fine for a dark ending, because it's just like, yeah, she won, but she's the only one left, and no one's ever going to believe her.
Aside from her cat, but who's going to listen to the cat?
Yeah, especially when it's orange and has no brain cells. Sorry, couldn't help it.
No, they can't all be as smart as trouble. But yeah, now let's be honest. Aliens was probably the one high peak of the movies when you really think about it.
Yeah, because it's just like took the base that the first one set up and expanded on it in a really logical way, where it's just like scaling up the number of aliens ended up making it not necessarily like the first one on a bigger scale, but they've smartly changed the kind of movie it then was.
And it had a more uplifting ending. It had a more uplifting, and the most uplifting ending out of most of them.
Before it got torpedoed in the next one, anyway.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, just where that one ended was the most uplifting ending. That's why it hurt so bad that's why it left a taint on the third one so badly when they killed him off. It's like, there's just some things you don't go that dark on after you ended so upliftingly. But, I realized also 1 and 3 do match up more than 1 and 3 is where it's the most compatible with your idea comparison to Cthulhian. You know what I mean? Whereas second one, not so much. Except for the queen.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
It feels, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm more looking at like the second one is almost like mankind's trying to push back against the old ones. And in that case, they barely survive by the skin of their teeth.
It would be more fair to compare the Xenomorphs to something like the Elder Things, just this older civilization that even had its own monsters that they feared.
Definitely. And let me just put it this way also, with how dangerous these Xenomorphs can be. Yeah, you aware of the comic that's been going on, Alien versus Avengers?
No.
Believe it or not, it's set in a dark future where the Xenomorphs have been dominating. If they can take out the Avengers. Now, granted, that was a case where there was multiple hives sent to Earth, and they were completely caught unaware until it was too late.
Which I can buy that.
Definitely. And again, it's just such an interesting thing. Is by the time we jump ahead, where everything starts. Yeah, for one, Valeria, the youngest daughter of Reed and Sue Richards of the Fantastic Four, is now a grown woman, and a middle-aged woman. That tells you how long it's been. And by that point, there's barely anyone left. It's just one of those type of things, and you're just like, but that tells you again the might of the Xenomorphs because everyone's like, oh, it's a bug hunt. Like you're like they think like the Colonial Marines. It's a bug hunt. We can handle this. There's a reason why the Xenomorphs are good for one thing, and that's destruction. You can't control them.
Yeah.
But if you ever want to weaponize them, it's only for a place you have no need to want to take over that area.
Yeah, it's just like they're only good for scorched earth.
Exactly. Otherwise, unless you're going to nuke it from orbit afterwards, making that place useless to you, you shouldn't do anything because there ain't no way of controlling them. Nothing. You can't. They're animals, and there's one thing we've learned is we can tame animals to a point. But if one thing I even say, even Resurrection showed, they can learn. That one bit where they sacrifice one of their own so they can use its acid to escape, I still love that moment. That
yeah,
was one of
that
the
one
moments.
was really smart.
Exactly. You're just like, oh, they know self-sacrifice.
Hmm.
Think about that a second. They understand the concept of self-sacrifice. That's terrifying.
Yeah, or it's just like they're more concerned about the survival of the species as a whole over like one individual member, which is like, oh, oh crap!
Mhm.
Yeah, that is a really big development.
Exactly. The only thing that matters is the queen. The queen is all that matters. And again, just there was just so much the love that's going over all this. But like I said, the trilogy, you can't help but look at it as like one big story,
Hmm.
warts and all. And then again, 4 is definitely the odd one out. Rec Room is the one you don't want around.
Yeah, this you can go ahead and skip that one. You'd be better for not having
Unless
watched it.
everyone would agree with that. But again, 4 is definitely weakest that isn't an atrocity.
It's
But
like it's just meh. Could
feels
have
like,
been worse.
yeah,
Could have been a lot better too.
looking back over, I gotta say it's the one you could lose and not lose anything.
Yeah, like if you're strapped for time, you can go ahead and just skip 4 and Requiem and essentially get the full experience.
You could also skip AVP 1 technically. It
But
doesn't
that
really,
was fun, so we'll keep it.
yeah, we will definitely keep it. Requiem, not even in the ballpark. Torch it, burn it with fire, kill it with fire. Again, but yeah, but then the duology, talk about a mess overall, in the overall scheme of things. It was a mess of a duology.
Yeah, we're probably for the best that we didn't get the last movie.
Definitely. And I just, I can't help but wonder though what their plans originally were. The alien government was all purely done as a reactionary, a knee-jerk reaction to everything that went on. And, to all the critical backlash and fan backlash. But it also bothers me that Ridley Scott felt like, oh, I want nothing to do with the Xenomorphs. And which is fine to a point. But then it just feels like because it didn't do so well, it just feels like, oh, they're done. It's like, who are you to make that decision, dude?
Yeah.
And again, that's part of the reason why I feel like it went was David, because he felt upset that the engineers were not looked favored upon. And I'll be honest, looking back, the engineers were more better as a looming threat than they were as the big bad.
Yeah, just like I would have accepted them where it's just like, yeah, they were people who tried to create life of all kinds, and that went horrifically wrong. And now it's just like their fucked up experiments are rampaging across the cosmos. It's
Yeah.
setting up that we could get more interesting monsters down the line.
Exactly. By the way, you want to know what happened to that one alien that bursted out of the chest and the engineer?
What?
According to one of the Dark Horse comics, so questionable continuity, it somehow evolved into being like a giant mountain.
You know,
Like a
I
giant
could
mountain of
roll with
flesh.
that.
Yeah, giant mountain of flesh, it's an alien flesh. Everything around where the
Ooh.
Prometheus is.
You know, I actually kind of dig like big living locations like that. I would love to see a movie set around that. Why can't we have that movie?
Who can say? Of course, the fact that its own inclusion in general was up in the air because of Covenant. So because of that, Dark Horse was shackled. And that's the problem with an IP.
Yeah, unfortunate.
But yeah, but again, it did start off strong. Prometheus started off really strong, but I'll be honest, yeah, looking back on it, the flaw was when the engineer got out. That's really when the flaws started happening when you think about it.
Yeah,
So,
I think it could have been a case where it's like it was probably best done as an Atlantis situation where they all basically got killed by their own hubris.
exactly, or at least in this location, which is what we had until they found out one was alive. And then I hate to say it was a generic bad guy. And we still
Yeah,
don't know
it's
why.
like,
Yeah.
could have been a lot more interesting. Like, you could have had another timeline where it's like, okay, he actually does give him something that would make him immortal and restore him, and then he turns into a whole other different monster.
Or better
That
yet,
would have been interesting.
have him be a rogue agent, and he was the one who looked at humanity as the failure, but he didn't represent all of them.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, again, because of the broader nature and everything, and the fact that originally was supposed to be a done in one, and then Damon Lindelof came in and said, let's make it a trilogy. And then he left before it went any further.
Yeah, this
Which
would have been a lot better as a done in one, honestly.
it would have. Now, Covenant was not the original plan for the trilogy, obviously. But the fact that it ended with so many things unanswered in Prometheus, and again, that's why it's different bad comparison. But I was just to say but that's part of why I don't like that the engineer just felt so generic. His look was fine in its own right, but as a monster on doing the same stuff the Xenomorphs would do, there's a reason the offspring in Romulus was more intimidating.
Yeah, I feel like there is a lot of merit to having something that was the predecessor to humanity be in the uncanny valley, because it's just like, yeah, they created us, but at the same time, there's something that's like so alien to us that it's unsettling. It's just like,
exactly,
get it away.
Exactly. Now, I can tell you one other thing. There's one thing that I really had a problem, and that's the one thing that Resurrection made clear and everything was the reliance on the eggs at LV-426. That bothers me. They treated like that's the only batch of eggs there ever were, and they were never able to find them anywhere else.
Like, I highly doubt that. This seems like a species that would be highly invasive if even just one species, like humans, got a hold of space travel.
Exactly.
I don't buy that at all.
Because it just felt that way. Like, especially when they said, like, oh, Ripley took it out with her. It's like, it took out the one location you guys were willing to look for. Tells me they were more lazy that they didn't want to find anything anywhere else. Then again, they got bought out by Walmart, so maybe that is the case.
Yeah, I can also believe that as corporate shenaniganery. So it's like, yeah, I can accept that as a reason. They could have gone to find places, but why do that when you already know a place where it is? Who cares how many people and how many bodies we have to throw at it?
Speaking of which, the whole idea of Weyland-Yutani wanting to find the Xenomorph or the engineers initially, I do like that. It started with them wanting to find the engineers first, and the Xenomorphs, them weaponizing them was more the lower tier lackeys' desires, like Burke, not the upper tier workers. Again, if we ignore Resurrection, of course. And I actually do like that they have, while still selfish motives, it wasn't a let's make a weapon out of it initially.
It was more like the kind of eccentric things you do when you have few money.
Yep, and it's like, let's find a cure, because that's what Romulus showed. Romulus showed it was more about gathering the pathogen than it was, let's make weapons out of them. Which, of course, adds more of a darker turn to Hadley's Hope being created. Because they knew.
Yeah.
Because, let's be honest, this actually, oh God, this adds a darker turn now. Romulus, I just realized that. Romulus really added a darker turn to spin to it. Maybe Burke might not have known, but corporate knew.
Yeah, it's just like they set up that colony to fail.
They set it up so they can be caught, xenomorphed. But I'm pretty sure those that were talking to Ripley didn't know.
Yeah, it's just like, this is entirely like
at the top
echelon conspiracy kind of thing.
The Yutani family probably knew.
Yeah.
But
the other thing we got that was good from
Requiem was Yutani.
Requiem was the implied lore between how Weyland became Weyland-Yutani, and that it's the folks from Utani that seem to be really in on the more unethical things, whereas like
Wayland felt more, which even then, it feels more like, here's what I realized. If you keep AVP canon, then the Wayland we got in Prometheus is just a more extreme version of Bishop Wayland from AVP. Both still having like well-intentioned reasons, although at the very least, Bishop Wayland was more selfless in his desires. Like he went in, like, you know, and everything just saw like, let's find it. All he saw was he was finding one thing and that was it. Whereas the other one, he was trying to do it because he wanted to cheat death. Ugh. Bishop was happy with his mortality. Bishop Wayland, I mean. And and I gotta say also, the very idea of this, let's talk about the synthetics for a second. The very idea that almost look at when you had David and I just forgot his name now, the other synthetic.
I think it was like Ash or something.
No, Walter. I'm talking Walter. From Covenant.
Oh yeah, Walter.
Yep. Comparable, and humans making synthetics is comparable to the engineers making their creations. And it's also the amount, but I still love that whole idea about people like Ash and David were too human. Way too human, which eventually led to guys like Andy and Bishop being created. Again, because let's be honest, Ash and Rook were way too human, those types. Because you couldn't tell. You could not tell whatsoever, except for a few quirks.
I guess it's sort of like that old debate where it's just like, what do you need to like truly be moral or whatever?
Because it's that whole balance of being ridiculously human, but then you have the downside of that, because then you have ambition, you have desires, which can be both good, but more likely bad, especially when it's something that's not used to such feelings. And look at David. David proved that. He eventually gained a God complex. Which, let's be honest, he was well on his way there already.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I didn't complain about. It did not feel like character assassination so much as the unfortunate inevitability. You know what I mean? But yeah, and of course, Andy, gotta love Andy from Romulus. You know, just so, you know, nice and sweet and all that. I love how they expand on how easy it is for an synthetic to go corrupt.
Like that part of his whole arc was really fascinating, but they also set up the way that could get reversed like way early into the movie, so that was easy to buy.
And I also like the very idea that Bishop made clear, like, I cannot do it because it will go against my programming. But then we found out, no, there is a way. He would let others die if it would save a majority of people.
Which it's like, that's just the classic trolley problem. That makes perfect sense to kind of program a machine to act like that, because it's just like, you're here to maximize the amount of human life that's saved. And sometimes in order to make an omelet, you gotta break some eggs.
Exactly. And of course, the humans aren't going to be happy about it, but it's like, it's logical. And again, even with Andy, he was, one thing I did like also with Andy is that his actions made, or at least at first, like taking out the one girl, it made sense. She was infected and everything, and look at what happened. He was going to make it merciful for her, but emotions ran high. Then the second one time around, that one was a bit more iffy. You know what I mean? Like not letting it in. Like, granted, it would have killed him, but you don't know. That's a case where it's like he didn't even bother to think of alternatives.
Yeah.
And again, first one, there was no alternative. Let's be honest. There was no alternative. That thing was going to come out of her, and everyone was just, it's like better safe than sorry with how dangerous these things are. And that's one thing I did find Rook to be one of the most sinister of the villains.
Yeah, because it's just like, he really legitimately seems like he's a good guy at first. Like, he's just one guy who's an unfortunate victim trying to keep the tragedy from repeating again, but nope.
Nope, he just cares about the company. He just happens to be right in other regards.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and let's also look at the tough ladies, because there's a lot of tough ladies in this. Obviously,
Yes,
Ripley,
and that's great. It's just they're not always handled the greatest. Like, they don't necessarily know what they had here at times.
Ripley, gold standard. Obviously,
Yep,
the reason why
gold standard, big time.
people bring her and Sarah Connor up as some of the best female action heroes, and I would agree, especially with Aliens. Cameron is best with that because he improved Ripley and created Sarah. And even her demise in the third one was still a strong character because it's like she's pushed to the breaking point.
And it was ultimately her choice to do that, which is a lot more than we can say about the fates of the other gals in this film.
Yep, except for AVP.
Yeah.
She was very good, if a little front-loaded in her awesomeness.
Yeah, that was definitely a lot more clumsy. Though I'd have to say that I'm not
good characterization. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying.
I sort of agree with like not being too hasty to label something a Mary Sue.
Oh no!
I feel like the thing to do is like swap the gender. Would we have called a character like this this overpowered if it were a guy? I don't think so in this
Depends
case.
on the actor. Depends on the actor in that regard. If it's someone like Arnold, yes. If it's someone like Bruce Willis, no.
Yeah, it's just like, anyways, getting back on track.
Yeah, like I said, but she was. But I still think she was balanced by good characterizations with Waylon.
Oh yeah, that conversation about just
Her
the
dad,
whole climbing to the top of the mountain was definitely one of the highlights of the film.
And it really established. It was that one scene that gave her a lot more than other characters of her type. Where if they didn't have that scene, oh yeah, she's throwaway. I would say she's like, oh, there's nothing great about her. But that one scene and the acting between the two really sold me on her character. Which is more than I can say for Requiem's badass lead.
Yeah.
That's good. Oh, she's a war vet.
The less we can say about that movie, the better.
Yep. And even Ripley in Resurrection was more quirky. That made her interesting. But throughout a lot of it, it's just like, again, great acting, but they lost me. I would not want to see more was Ripley 8. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just like her story is told. We don't need to add on to her story specifically. Tell stories with other people in this universe or other places in this universe, but that's a storybook that's already been closed, and trying to add more onto it retroactively risks ruining it.
Yep, and then the duology, of course. Shaw, again, looking back on Prometheus with Shaw, I do like her. But at the same time, she had a lot of moments where she was more a wounded animal. And she is more like reacting to everything more so than standing up to it.
That being said, she's definitely more of an ideals gal and a scientist.
Oh, yes.
So I can absolutely believe that. The thing that really makes her strong is just her ability to endure and power through stuff over her ability to smack something down.
Oh, no, and I agree with that. That still makes her a strong character. I am not arguing that. I'm just saying between her and Daniels. Daniels was more of a pushback type of person. Ripley's more of a pushback. You know what I mean? Whereas Shaw, by comparison, again, she's her own strong character. But it did feel like, again, her is more like like I said, comparing it to a wounded animal. You get what I mean by that? Because, especially after she cut herself, like, granted, everything leading up to her getting that alien cut out of her was good. But then so much of the rest of it just felt like, okay, they're making it be she's in pain, but shouldn't she be passing out by now? It's that whole, you know what I mean, right? It's like, it's not like her arm's in a cast or a sling. It's a case where it's like she got cut open at her belly area and got stapled up, and yet she's still keeping herself conscious.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying, right? It's like,
Yeah, I do. And I don't really have anything to say to that point.
right. Again, I'm not saying she's bad. She is a very strong character, stronger than even the AVP girls. But I'm just saying, if I had to pick between her and Dallas, I still pick Dallas.
Daniels, you mean?
Daniels. Why did I say Dallas? Daniels.
It starts with a D and ends with an S and has
an L in it.
And
has an L in it. So yeah. But I think also it was the acting. I think when you look at Catherine Waterston, it's like, I don't know. I got more of I actually got a Ripley vibe from her in a good way. But again, not complaining about either actresses in general.
Yeah, if we had all of the protagonists kind of be the same character archetype, that would also be boring too.
Agreed. That's why, again, I do feel Shaw and Daniels are very different from Ripley, like, and in both different regards. Like Shaw, she's the scientist; she's closer to the upper corporate level. Daniels is more still above. Again, she's above a trucker, but beneath her, she's in between the two. And then Ripley's the trucker, just as hardworking, like working for a living, trying to just do stuff for her daughter. Of which I did find out about Ripley's husband. Turns out her daughter's biological father not in the picture, and the father that raised her was not the greatest. So it's led to her having very strong issues when dealing with misogyny and all that. But not in a I am woman, hear me roar type of way. Just
it's the understandably traumatized.
Exactly. Which again makes you like, wow, Ripley, you had bad taste in men until you met Hicks and
Hicks, yeah.
And Clemens, I believe, from 3. You know what I mean? So it's like, I guess there weren't guys like either of those when she was getting older. Who could say? But and also, let's be honest, one last thing to bring up. The crew in general, the camaraderie when things were at their best is when the crew felt real.
Oh yeah, that was definitely one consistent element where you could believe that this people like either worked together or formed a strong bond over the course of the mission if they hadn't worked together before.
Even in Covenant, when they killed off James Franco before he even got a line, except for the short, yet you still felt like he was part of the crew. Even when he was in the short, you still felt like, oh yeah, part of the crew. What does that say, right? Because the way everyone talked about him, you wanted to know more about him.
Yeah, it's just like the big difference between like a character death that matters and a character death that doesn't, that's just there for shock value, is like, how much of an impact do they have on the plot after they're already dead? Do people talk about them again? Are they still remembered? Do they still have like a significance to the characters who are left alive? And it doesn't necessarily even matter if they were on screen for very long or on screen at all. They just have to sell us on the characters actually caring about them.
Yep. But I also did like they picked a recognizable face. They had him in the marketing and then just killed them off. Because unlike killing off Hicks and Newt in 3, you didn't have anything to establish it. So going with a recognizable name actually makes sense. The thing is, like what type of performance he's given in other roles, so you can get a general idea of what kind of character he probably was. I mean, that's kind of smart. Quirky,
yeah, it's a
smart.
less is more approach to storytelling.
Exactly. And again, look at the crew and on the Nostromos in the first one. You wouldn't really know. Like there are some, actually no, I take that. There are some indications to make clear So for many of them, this was their first job together. And yet others, you're like, it's like some might have worked or at least were aware of each other beforehand. I like that as well. Like you really look at their interactions because it's like the fact that Dallas was expecting Ripley to open the door, which if he had known her, he would known she wouldn't have followed that order.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things like that. And although then there was a scene that was edited out of the director's cut where apparently it was revealed that Dallas and Ash had worked together on other missions before.
That's an interesting take. I don't hate that thought.
That was in the original theatrical.
Oh.
But for whatever reason, Ridley removed it.
That's kind of weird.
I wonder if they wanted to remove the idea that Dallas had a history with Ash because then he's a robot.
Mm-hmm.
You think that could have been it?
Yeah. Hmm.
Because really, that line is actually kind of important.
Yeah.
It's like with it, you don't wonder, wow, wonder what other mission was Ash sent on and why was Dallas? And yet, or the bigger thing, was Ash, and was it always Ash, or was it a real person that looked similar to Ash and then got replaced?
Because you know that they're lifelike enough to pass for human if you don't know otherwise.
Which would have been fine until we saw Rook and the Bishop and realized, oh wait, that's the standard and look for the models.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops. Okay. Big Sid asks, which is truly of the three best bots or best synthetics, how would you rank them? I think we both agree Bishop number 1.
Yeah, he's the OG.
He's the OG. Then
I don't want to say Andy for number 2 just because they explored his character in such depth.
Yep. And then Walter's number 3. And that's unfortunate, but the taint from David is still there.
Yeah, it's like...
It was like he was created to be the opposite of David in every way. And that was good.
But also it means that you're stuck in relation to this other character who is kind of a plot tumor.
Yep. And like I said, after Covenant, I hate David. I can't even look back at Prometheus now and look at him, knowing what he does. Don't you hate movies that do that, where they taint a character you actually didn't mind in the other movie?
Yeah, it's just like retroactively you can't go back to it because you know what's going to eventually happen.
Sometimes it works.
Thanks, Game of Thrones.
Yep. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you can look back and you're like, oh. Then you start to look back at it more.
Oh, wow. The signs were all there that they were going to be like this. That was really smart. But this one, it's just disappointment.
It's disappointment because it's like the signs were there and you're just like, oh, they went through with it. Great. But yeah, but again, so I think that's pretty much enough for our retrospective, don't you think? We've kind of covered everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I do want more. There's talks of
I definitely want to see more, and I guess I will be seeing a bit more of it in the immediate future. Unfortunately, I can't afford to get Alien Isolation myself, but I'll absolutely enjoy watching it now that I have this context.
Yep. Actually, one quick thing. Since I got you here, let me just check one thing. Hold on.
What's up?
I'm just double checking if it's on sale or anything. Is it? And nope, not for a good deal anyway. Sorry.
Unfortunate, though I will say that part of my ulterior motive is watching the stream is that it's actually gonna have some live commentary from one of the VAs in the game that happens to be like one of my favorite ever.
Who's that?
Anthony Howell.
Anthony Howell.
This is one of the androids in it, apparently.
You always know a working Joe. Anthony Howell, you said?
Yeah.
Anthony Howell. So, he's an English actor.
Yep.
Sorry, just looking it up very quickly. You just piqued my interest. So, on video, he's done a lot of video games.
Oh, yeah.
Samuels. He's one of the good ones. He's the guy who brought Amanda on board in the first place.
Alrighty then. Well, I guess I have something nice to look forward to.
You definitely do. And they actually got all of the original actors, bar Ian Holm, to reprise their roles. And for some of them, this was some of the last things they did.
Alrighty then. Well, it sounds like I'm in for a great time then.
Yep. But yep. So that's our final word for now on the Alien franchise. I would not mind us talking about Isolation after you've seen it and after I've gone through it myself.
Yeah, we can come back for that.
Oh, remind me, I did tell you about what the bullshit that was the attempt at a retcon in Colonial Marines, right? What they revealed. Oh, Hicks didn't die.
I would have preferred them to just actually reveal that in the movie. Like, I would have been fine with, like, a fake out death for him.
Yeah, but nope, it was basically revealed. Oh, turns out Wayland got there earlier. They opened up for him. A struggle happened. Someone else who was just as badly damaged as Hicks landed up in the pod when it got launched out. And throughout a lot of the mission, it's Hicks trying to get to Ripley. And it turns out he's there to see her fall in.
Oh, okay, that's just a gut punch that was unnecessary.
Well, they didn't want to clash with what actually happened in the movie.
Yeah.
So I get that. And then it just went down from there. And this is where this is the version trying to say, oh, Bishop was the other Bishop was a robot, not a human. I prefer him as a human if he's supposed to be Bishop's creator.
Yeah.
And being a mad scientist.
Yes, I do love me some mad scientists.
I like that, how he's like, no, we're going to destroy it. Then a few moments later, think of what we can learn from it. It's like, you couldn't hold it in, could you? You couldn't hold it in, could you?
Yeah.
It's like, you really think you're going to convince her? You really think you're going to convince her by saying, think what we can learn from it? You're giving her all. It's just like, dude, I've already made my decision. Don't need to convince me more. I love that meme. I love that meme more these days.
Yeah.
Have you seen that meme? You know, when someone asks a question, it makes a statement, the other person says something that in their eyes means it's a argument, then they're like, dude, I've already made my decision. Don't need to convince me more.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
Yep, and I'm just like, that's basically what happened with the other Bishop and Ripley. It's like, think of what we can learn from it. Dude, I'm going to off myself. You don't need to encourage me anymore. By the way, I don't think you'd actually be able to handle Isolation because it is terrifying. It is. Oh, God. Just think about it. You can't kill the thing. You cannot kill the alien. All you can do is be careful. And worst of all,
yeah, I am kind of terrible at stealth games just in general. Like, I consider myself a fairly competent gamer in most respects, but stealth gameplay is just one of those things I've never been able to get. Hence why I'm going to watch it secondhand.
And worst of all, it can hear the motion tracker.
Oh, God.
So if you have the motion tracker, and even if it's like in the same room across the other end, it'll come booking right towards you and you're dead. One hit kill. Yeah, it's nerve-wracking. But anyway, now let's wrap it up. Thank you for joining on this one, Ingrid. Thank you, everyone else. Hope you enjoyed our entire retrospective videos, reviews. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.